Hello and welcome. I'm Barton Poulson, and I am here as part of my Data is for Doing office hours and to talk today about how I ended up where I am, my own career path in data science. And I'm calling it a random walk because it has followed very unusual patterns to get here. If you're familiar, random walk is a term from physics that refers to a particle bouncing randomly off of other things and randomly changing directions. And you calculate how long it takes for it to get to a particular location. And sometimes it takes a really long time. And that seems like a good analogy for my own career. Now, before we get started, I need to make something really, really clear. My goal here is not to tell you how to get a job in data science. I am simply not in a position to do that. I'm not here to give advice about your career. I'm simply here to tell you how I ended up where I am. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn called Data is for Doing also, and I talked about that recently, where I give a little bit of my own story. But because my circumstances, my background, and my situation are different than most people, you're going to have to find a way to see if there's something useful in that. But just make it really clear I'm not here how to tell you how to become a machine learning engineer for a major tech company. I can't do that. That's not my goal. But I'm going to here to talk about other things that have made my work in data science, I think, meaningful, rewarding. And before I get started on that, I want to ask you to do one thing. If you're logged in and if you're able to, I would love for you to make a comment and say hello and tell me where you are. I know that there are people registered for this event that are all around the world, and I have on LinkedIn, I'm connected with people from over 200 different countries, and so I know you're out there somewhere. I am in Salt Lake City in Utah in the Western United States. It's noon, and I am in my basement, but I would love to hear from you and to know how things are going. Also, as a reminder, this session is being recorded and it will be available immediately afterwards as a recording on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Facebook. But if you can, make a comment and let me know where you are. I would love to hear from you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with I have a presentation for notes. I'll be using that for parts of this, but it's not the entirety of what I'm doing. So let me switch over to the presentation and I'll turn off this banner here. But please, if you're there, please make a comment. Let me know where you are. So my career in data science now, well, it requires a bit of explanation. Let me start with this. I'll just say what I am not. And I do not do artificial intelligence. I'm not a machine learning engineer. So I do not work in big tech. That's the San Francisco, excuse me, that's the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, by the way. And I don't work for some scrappy data science startup. And I know for a lot of people, they go, what's left? Because for them, that is the data science world. But one of the things I try to talk about in so many of my courses and the things that I write is data science, and the term I usually use is data work, is just so much bigger than that. Yeah, if I don't specifically do these things professionally, although I am employed by LinkedIn as for some of my work, but there's the whole rest of the world is available, and that's an important thing. Also, um, I'm not flying around on a private jet with stacks of cash on my table and a bottle of champagne. You shouldn't be talking on your cell phone on an airplane anyhow. Um, I'm not living this extravagant lifestyle. Now, in my career, I'm doing very well. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to give specific numbers, except to say that I'm about on par with a senior data scientist for a major tech company. Um, because the meaning of money changes depending on where you are and what your circumstances are. So no, I'm not going to live this extravagant lifestyle, but I'm living well, and I want to talk about really also how that's a different goal and might be a good goal for you too. What I am, first off, is I'm a professor. I have a day job. I have a PhD in social psychology. I'm a professor at Utah Valley University, which is a teaching school in Orem, Utah. And I work with data. Even though my PhD is in psychology, the only class I teach these days is statistics at the university. And then I do statistics and data science and business intelligence and other circumstances. I have a company that I made called datalab.cc. I'll talk about that a little bit. And I also previously ran a data service event called the Data Charrette, where people volunteer to work with local nonprofits and help them with their data issues. Now, I also work for LinkedIn as a contract basis. So my full-time gig is as a professor at Utah Valley University, where I'm a tenured full professor. But I'm also a contract author for LinkedIn. I actually have 42 English courses and I have 46, 45, 46 translations. And that's a beautiful job because it gives me a global reach, including that's how I connected with most of the people that I know on LinkedIn. Now, what I am is I'm a teacher, and I know for a lot of people that is not the same thing as data science, but well, of course it is. The idea that you're only a data scientist if you are a machine learning engineer and you are working at a tech company, I mean, yeah, that's one narrow view of the field, but the field is so much bigger than that. I work with data. I teach people to work with data. I teach people to make sense of data and to apply it. That's totally data science. It's just a broader definition. And one of the things that I think is most important for my career and for other people's career is to have an open mind and keep a broad idea of what's available to you. Let's see here. Now, there's a few things I want to mention. What I've liked about my career. Yeah, I'm not flying around in a private jet and I'm not driving a Maserati, but I've done well in the field. Um, I don't have any debt. Our house is paid off, our cars are paid off, and that my wife and I are able to be providers for our family and for others. We have three adult children, two of whom are still in college. We're able to support them in that. Um, we're able to support the local food bank. We're able to support the dance companies, and we're in a position because of this work to be providers for the people and the organizations around us that we care about. And so I think that's a great measure of prosperity. That said, we also live a very affordable life. We live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and while Salt Lake is getting more expensive, it's nothing like living in New York City, where we used to live, or Los Angeles, where I grew up. Um, I went to affordable colleges. I went to Brigham Young University, which is very affordable for a private school. I went to the City University of New York Graduate Center, a state school. And I teach at Utah Valley University, again, another state school, and my three children go there. It's very affordable. And we focus on these things because one of the big things talking about, I've seen one interesting argument about are you wealthy is about is your income greater than your spending or your needs and your wants? And I feel that with my wife and me, we've done a good job of that. My wife, by the way, is a part-time teacher in the theater department at the university by our house, and she's also a modern dance choreographer. Um, and also, we get to go do fun stuff. We're not flying in the private jet, but I have a few bicycles. I love to ride my bike. She rides her bike to work every day that she goes. We get to travel several weeks a year, and so those are things that this career has made possible for us. Now, I will mention that money, employment, degrees, none of those solve everything. My life is still stressful. I still have to deal with reality, and I can tell you from personal experience that, again, getting the degree, getting the job, getting the money does not fix everything. They certainly help. I'm grateful for all of them. They help. but they don't take care of everything. Life is just hard. Now, let me tell you a little formula about how I feel I have managed to succeed in my particular career. And then I'm going to say more about each of these. The first thing is, I feel I add value to people's work and to their own lives. I teach them something that is useful to them and that helps them accomplish the goals that are important to them. That's a great way to make a career. We're doing something useful. Again, my wife and I are both teachers. We love that responsibility and we love helping people improve their own lives. And I love helping people, take these things and use them in their own professional lives. The second thing, I do my job well. I've got over 30 years of experience, and I've been able to work on my craft a lot in different settings, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback. I've gotten, directions on how to change things, which I've done, but I do something and I do it well. And then the third thing is I've done it long term. I'm 58 years old, and I have been I was in school until I was 32. That's when I got my PhD. And I started making, I got employed at my first job shortly after that. I've been at my university for 23 years about, but the work I do with LinkedIn, things didn't really take off until I was 50 years old. And so I know that's depressing for a lot of people, but it also is a way of saying you have to take the long view. My wife was a starving artist, and I was a starving student for a very long time before things really took off for us. Now, let me talk about each of these things separately. The first one is I use data to add value. I add value to people's work. So when I say I'm a teacher and people go, well, that's not data science. You have to be a programmer, a machine learning engineer. No, 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 no. I use data to add value to people's work and to their lives. And so I do this by teaching introductory statistics to undergraduate students. I do this by consulting with local organizations. I do this by the courses I create for LinkedIn. I do this by reaching out with people on the LinkedIn network. And so my focus is always on data and how people can use it to do their professional work better, more efficiently, more effectively, how to reduce lost time. And I focus on a lot of small things. Now, I am capable of creating a neural network, um, but 99.9% of my work, really, we find the greatest value is in spreadsheets and in pivot tables. And then I sometimes go to an app like SPSS or Jamovi, which I love if you have to do a regression. And only after that will I break out something like R, which is my preferred programming language for working with data, or I'm capable of working in Python, but I'm more comfortable in R. But all of these, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find ways to help people solve problems that are important to them. That is how I add value. And I use my training in data, and that helps me add value. Now, let me, after that, go to this one. I do the data work well. And the reason I have this picture right here of two people talking is because I believe that in order to do your data work well, you first have to understand the problems that your client or your stakeholders are trying to resolve. What's the problem? If you don't have a very, very clear idea of what the goal is, you're not going to be able to add value. Second, you have to understand their perspective, also their constraints and their possibilities to give them actionable insights that mean something to them. Tell them something they can do. Like I make videos and I stick them online, and I think I've been very successful for a person who makes videos about statistics. I've got uh, I want to say like 30 million views on various platforms, 30 or 40 million views, which is great. I could get a lot more. On the other hand, that would be a very poorly performing video for somebody who was a musician. If I made videos of people falling downstairs, I would get more views overall. But that's not what I'm interested in doing. So that's not a helpful suggestion for me. If you want more views, dance in your videos and stuff. Anyhow, no. The important part here is to give useful advice and do it well. You need to understand your client's needs. Now, I'll tell you something else. And by the way, that means you have to talk with your clients. You have to talk with them to understand what the goals are and what a reasonable solution looks like. What are some of the interesting possibilities for them? Because you might have to think outside the box. The other thing, and I know a lot of times when I say my degree is not in statistics or computer science or data science. My degree, I have 4 degrees, but they're all in psychology. And I know a lot of people would look at that and go like, well, I want to be a data scientist. I don't want to be a psychologist. Well, aside from the fact that I'm not a psychologist, I mean, that's a regulated profession. And that means a therapist, a licensed clinical psychologist. That's not me. I'm trained as a researcher. Um, what it does, though, is it gives me a lot of understanding into humans. And I know a lot about how people think, react, how they operate in their environment. And I think that that gives me a huge advantage when it comes to giving useful, actionable insights from people's data. So, one of my favorite people on LinkedIn, Cassie, who was the chief decision scientist at Google, um, she has a background in theater. And I think that made an enormous difference for her own work. I I think there is no such thing as time wasted reading a novel or a history or a biography. And I mean, I'm reading the Iliad again. Um, I read these short little sci-fi novellas because I love them. Anything that gives you a better understanding of people, along with the problems that they confront and the ways that they deal with them and how that experience is for them, is going to be a huge advantage when it comes to doing your own data work. I know it has made a big difference in my work because I'm also able to look at the data and come up with several reasonable ways that the data might have ended up the way that they did. We solved some very bizarre problems by having a better understanding of how humans operate in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons that I do my data work well and have succeeded in it. Another one, doing data work long term. So I ride bicycles. I'm a member of Randoneers USA. Here's their little manual. And these are bike rides that start at 200 kilometers, 124 miles. And I'm going to try to do my first 300-kilometer ride next week. And we'll see how that goes. But one of the things about riding bikes or, going for a hike or something, I have this winding road here because if the person starts way back at the end and you're riding your bike, you come around the corner and you only see this first part, you go like, oh, it's a mountain climb. Oh, there's switchbacks. It's going to be hard. And it's not till you get around halfway through, you're like, oh my goodness, there's more switchbacks. There's more mountain. You get around and you go like, oh, there's more. And sometimes you just don't know how far you're going. Now, it's a long game and it requires riding in a way, if I'm riding a bike, you got to ride in such a way that you can keep it up for a long time. One of the things that I feel has contributed to my success in my own career is that I have been able to play a very long game. Um, and that I feel that I've been pretty persistent in a lot of things. I mean, I was in school, I was in college for 12 years, 5 years to get my undergraduate degree, 7 years of graduate school. I've been employed at the same place for 22 years at Utah Valley University. Um, I've been married for 30 years. Um, we've raised our children. We're still talking to them. A lot of these things, it just requires taking a very long perspective. I know a lot of people who have this idea that they want to get rich right now. They want to get rich. They want to get there. They're going to go do this online thing and they're going to get this major job and they're going to be flying in the private jet with their stacks of cash and their champagne flute in no time. Um, Aside from the fact that I just don't think that ever works really for anybody. I think when people talk about their get rich experiences, I think they're usually being not very honest with us about what's worked for them or what hasn't. Um, Usually have to do a lot of very strange and unsustainable things to get there. I've, you know, I can tell you right now, if my father had invested just $10,000 in Berkshire Hathaway when I was born in 1967, that would be worth a super ton of money right now. I just, exponential growth over time. It's why one of the things that we've done for our children, give them the least exciting Christmas present ever, and that is we gave our kids an IRA, a retirement account. We say, look, I know this isn't fun, but you got to see what 40 years of compound interest looks like. It makes a big difference. And so I see that doing my data work, I've taken a very long-term perspective on it. And I think that for a lot of people, that's going to work too. Again, I wasn't even out of school until I was 32. My work with LinkedIn didn't really financially take off until I was 50. And for me, it's made a big difference to take this long-term perspective. And really, my point in all of this is the data world is so much bigger than you might think. There's so much more to it than simply working at one of the Magnificent Seven or the Bad X companies as a full-time programmer. I know a lot of people do that, but there's so many more opportunities. Um, what I want to mention too is I feel that I've been very, very lucky in several of the things that I've done, and that, I talked about how we live an affordable lifestyle, my wife and me, our family. Um, and well, I have been able to, the financial remuneration has been great, and I'm very happy for it. But I need to say that when you're making your own decisions about your careers, it's not just how much money are you getting, but it's also cost of living. I know that if I lived in San Francisco, I have a sister who lives in San Francisco, and if I worked where most of those companies are, I would be paying at least twice as much, maybe three times as much for my cost of living. Um, and so that's suddenly like only making half as much money. So I actually would be taking a loss to go move to San Francisco and work for one of these big companies. The second one is also in terms of how much time and how much stress, how much mental energy does it take? I've ended up in a very good situation where, although I do work a lot, it's not it's not the 40, 60, 80-hour grind that a lot of people expect. Um, Hearing horror stories about some organizations where people are putting in 80-hour weeks on a regular basis, and I sometimes have to crunch, but not like that. And so I feel that the career path I've taken, where I didn't mention, I originally studied industrial design. I took drawing classes when I was in college. I was going to be a designer. And then I switched over to psychology at first with the idea of being a therapist. And then I decided to go into research psychology. And then I ended up doing statistics. And then I ended up doing for LinkedIn. My career path has taken a lot of twists and turns. You just don't know where you're going to end up until you get going there. So I'm trying to tell you a little bit about how I got here. But I hope that some of these suggestions can be adapted to your own situation. Again, I know that I'm from an earlier generation than most of you, and I didn't face a lot of the same challenges that many other people do right now, and I don't have easy solutions to any of those. I'm very grateful that I teach at a university that is very affordable. My university is open enrollment, the tuition is very affordable, and I'm able to help a lot of people to help them get started without going massively into debt or to take unreasonable risks in getting their career started. And I hope that what I'm doing is useful for them. The same reason I like the things that I do for Data Lab and that I do for LinkedIn as a way of helping people get started on things that could potentially be useful. And with that, I believe that my time is up. So this has been, again, a personal story about some of the things I've done to end up where I am in the data world. I hope that they are useful to you. And I would love to hear from you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I do have a newsletter. I post occasionally. I have these office hours regularly, but please feel free to contact me. And I'm not able to say how to get a job as a machine learning engineer for X company. I just don't know that. But in terms of the broader range of how to make a life in data, I'd be happy to talk with you. And with that, folks, I'm going to say so much. I'm glad to have you here. Thanks for joining me. Bye bye.